Have you ever loved someone so deeply, only to discover they've been hiding a secret betrayal right under your nose? The chilling moment when everything you thought you knew about your life crumbles in an instant? I never imagined I'd be the one to uncover my wife's darkest secret, but when I did, it set off a chain of events that would change everything. Watch until the end to find out how the ultimate betrayal turned into the ultimate revenge. You won't believe what happened next. Chapter 1: The Beginning of the End. My name is Jacob, and this is the story of how my world came crashing down. It wasn't a single moment, but rather a slow, painful buildup to the disaster that would be my life. For years, I thought I had it. All my career was steady, my friends were loyal, and I had the woman of my dreams, Linda. We were happy, or so I believed. It all started to change a year ago, though. I could feel it in the air before I saw it. The way she looked at me was different. The tenderness in her touch, once a familiar comfort, began to fade. Linda started spending more time out with her friends more than usual. At first, I thought it was just a phase, maybe work stress or something trivial. But there was always a reason, an excuse, for why she was never home. I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself that everything would go back to normal. But every time I looked into her eyes, I saw a distance, a coldness that hadn't been there before. One night, she came home late again. She kissed me on the cheek, her lips cold and distant, before heading straight for the shower. I waited, sitting on the couch, pretending not to notice. The house felt emptier every time she stepped away. But then came that night, the night I would never forget. She had just gotten out of the shower, and I was preparing to go to bed when I noticed something on her neck. The marks were unmistakable. Red, almost bruised, but shaped in a way that made my blood run cold. Lips. The outline of a kiss. It wasn't mine. It wasn't from a lover's gentle caress. No, it was something else, something far more sinister. I couldn't breathe. I stared at her, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. And as she looked at me, the shock in her eyes, whether from guilt or surprise, I couldn't tell, was enough to confirm everything I feared. I had no proof, but I didn't need it. I knew in that moment that she had betrayed me. She tried to explain, of course. She told me it was nothing, just a mistake, just a moment of weakness. But the damage was already done. The trust was shattered beyond repair, and I couldn't unsee what I had seen. The woman I loved had kissed someone else, and in that moment, everything changed. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I needed time to think. Time to process the overwhelming rage, confusion, and heartbreak that coursed through me. And as I sat there, a cold, calculated thought crossed my mind. She had made me feel small, weak, and worthless. But now, the tables were about to turn. I wasn't just going to let her get away with this. She would regret this betrayal. She would feel the pain I was feeling, and I would make sure of it. Chapter 2: The Seeds of Doubt. After that night, everything felt different. The silence between Linda and me grew unbearable. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, felt like an attempt to hide the truth. But I couldn't let it go. I couldn't ignore the fact that the woman I loved, my partner, my confidant, had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. I started noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The little changes. Her phone, for example. She used to leave it lying around, but now she kept it close, even when she showered. And when I asked her about it, she would just shrug it off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I wasn't a fool. I knew what was going on. The lies. The avoidance. The sudden secrecy, everything pointed to one thing. I had to be sure. I couldn't just confront her without proof. I needed to know the truth. I began tracking her more closely. I knew her routine. I knew when she'd be out, when she'd be home. Every time she went out with friends, I became more suspicious. There were moments, fleeting glances, when I felt like someone was watching me. I could sense it, even when she wasn't around. Then, one evening, everything fell into place. I had just come home from work, expecting to find Linda in the kitchen, like she used to be. But instead, the house was eerily quiet. I noticed her car in the driveway, but she wasn't there. I checked the living room, the kitchen, the bathroom, no sign of her. The only thing out of place was her purse, sitting on the couch. I picked it up, hesitating for a moment before opening it. Inside, I found her phone. I didn't know what I expected to find. Maybe a message from a friend, maybe a call she'd missed. But what I found instead sent a chill down my spine. The text messages were there, plain as day, from a number I didn't recognize. Can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you. I'll be at the usual spot. I love you. My hands trembled as I read the words over and over. The betrayal was undeniable now. She had been meeting him, the man I had seen with her at work, the one I had been suspicious of from the start, Yuan, her colleague, the one she had become so close to, the one she swore was just a friend. But now it was clear. She had lied to my face. I felt like the floor had been pulled out from under me. I wanted to scream, to break everything in sight, but I just stood there, numb. My mind raced with thoughts of revenge, of how I was going to make her understand the depth of the pain she had caused me. But I didn't act right away. No, I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. I would let her live in her own lies for just a little longer. She didn't know it yet, but her world was about to be turned upside down. The next few days felt like a blur. Linda was more distant than ever, always making excuses to avoid me. But I wasn't going to confront her just yet. I had to plan my next move carefully. I had to make her feel what I was feeling, to taste the bitter sting of betrayal the way I had. I watched her every move, analyzing everything she did, everything she said. I wanted to know when and where she'd meet him again, and I would be waiting. I wasn't going to be the fool anymore. The seeds of doubt had been planted, and now I was going to let them grow into something far darker than she could ever imagine. Chapter 3. The First Confrontation. The days after discovering Linda's betrayal were the longest of my life. I didn't know what I was more consumed by, the crushing weight of the truth or the simmering rage that bubbled just below the surface. Every time she touched me, every time she spoke, I could feel the distance between us grow. Her lies, her coldness, they were unbearable. I couldn't stop myself from replaying that moment over and over, in my mind, the kiss on her neck, the bruised marks of someone else's lips. It wasn't just a physical mark, it was a scar on our entire relationship. And what made it worse was that she didn't even seem to care. I wasn't angry, not yet. I was hurt, but I was calculating. I needed to know more, to gather everything I could before I made my move. Then, one evening, Linda came home later than usual. Her excuse? Work, Jacob. You know how it is. But I knew better. I could see it in the way she avoided eye contact, the way she kept looking at her phone every time I asked her a question. She was hiding something, and that something was Ewan. I couldn't wait any longer. Linda, we need to talk, I said, my voice steady but sharp. She looked at me, her expression guarded. About what? She replied, her tone too casual, like nothing had changed. But I could see the tension in her eyes. She knew I was getting closer to the truth. I know about you and Ewan, I said, my words cutting through the air like a blade. She froze, her eyes wide in shock. I watched as the color drained from her face. The mask she had been wearing for months was finally slipping. What are you talking about? She asked, her voice shaking. But I could see the lie in her eyes. She was trying to cover it up, to play it off as though I hadn't just uncovered the most intimate part of her deception. Don't lie to me, I said, stepping closer. I've seen the text, Linda. I've seen everything. You're not fooling anyone anymore. Her hands trembled, and I could hear her breathing quicken. She didn't know what to say, how to make it better. She just stood there, caught in the web of her own lies. Jacob, I'm sorry. It was a mistake, she finally said, her voice pleading, but I could hear the desperation behind it. I never meant to hurt you. It didn't mean anything. The words hung in the air, but they didn't have the power to fix what was broken. You don't get it, do you? You don't get how much this hurts, I said, my voice quiet but full of conviction. You think it was just a kiss, just a fling, but it's so much more than that. You've destroyed everything. You've destroyed me. She looked at me, her eyes welling with tears, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I was beyond the point of compassion. The moment she chose him over me, over us, was the moment she lost my sympathy. You don't get to be sorry now, I said coldly. You don't get to fix this with a few words and tears. I want you to understand what this feels like. I want you to feel the pain you've caused me. I want you to know exactly what it's like to have everything you thought you knew ripped away. Her face crumpled, and for the first time in months, I saw her break. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for me to forgive her. It wasn't enough to erase the betrayal that had scarred my soul. You don't get to make it better, Linda. Not anymore. And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing in the living room, her tears falling freely now, but I couldn't bring myself to care. This wasn't about her anymore. This was about me. This was about my revenge. The confrontation had been cathartic, but it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. I wasn't going to let her walk away from this. No, Linda was going to understand deeply and painfully what it meant to betray me. And as I left the room, I knew I was already beginning to make my move. Chapter 4. The Web Unravels. The days after my confrontation with Linda felt like a blur. Her apologies, her tears, they didn't move me. I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let her off easy. She had hurt me in the worst possible way, and now she would see what it was like to feel the weight of betrayal, to understand the depths of regret. But I needed to be patient. Revenge, I knew, was a dish best served cold. Linda tried to make things right, of course. She was desperate, clinging to whatever shred of our relationship she could salvage. She said all the right things, how sorry she was, how she didn't mean for things to go this far, but it all sounded hollow, like an actor reading from a script, and I wasn't buying it. The truth was, I couldn't look at her the same way anymore. The love I once felt for her was gone, replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. I began to play the game. I had to make sure she felt the weight of what she had done, to remind her, every single day, of her betrayal. I didn't just want her to apologize, I wanted her to suffer, to feel every ounce of pain that I had been feeling since I discovered the truth. But I wasn't going to confront her head on. I had learned the hard way that nothing ever truly ended with a simple confrontation. There were layers to this. There was always more to uncover. Linda's behavior grew more erratic. She was desperate to prove her loyalty, constantly texting me, trying to make plans, promising to work on things. But I wasn't interested. I knew she had already made her choice, and now it was my turn to make mine. It was then that I decided to dig deeper. I wasn't going to just sit there and let things unfold. I had to know everything. I had to understand the extent of her deceit. And so, I began to follow her more closely. I kept tabs on her, watching her interactions, seeing who she was talking to, where she was going. I wasn't just watching her anymore, I was studying her, learning her movements, her routines. I needed to be 3 steps ahead, always. One night, I followed her. She had gone out with her friends again, and I knew where she was heading. I had seen the messages, the secretive whispers in the middle of the night. It wasn't hard to figure out where she'd be. I parked my car a few blocks away, watching the bar from a distance. She walked in with Ewan, her colleague, the man I had grown to despise. The way they looked at each other, the laughter, the shared glances was everything I needed to see. It was clear that whatever had happened between them wasn't just a fleeting affair. This was something more. Something deeper. I could feel my blood boil, but I didn't act immediately. No, I needed to wait. I needed to let this play out. I watched as they entered the bar together, but I stayed in the shadows, calculating my next move. I was done with the pretending. I was done with trying to salvage what was broken. This was no longer about saving a marriage, it was about making her understand, once and for all, the consequences of her actions. The next few days were filled with a tense, quiet anticipation. Linda had no idea that I knew what she was doing, that I was aware of every step she was taking. She tried to act normal, but I could see the cracks. I could feel the guilt radiating off of her. She had no idea what was coming. I decided it was time to make my move. I started with small things, deliberate acts that would make her question everything. I would drop little hints here and there, just enough to make her feel paranoid, but never enough to give it all away. I would tell her I was busy with work when she asked what I was doing, and I would smile to myself when I saw the tension in her eyes. She didn't know it, but she was already slipping into the web I had carefully crafted for her. The silence between us grew thicker, but it wasn't a silence of peace. It was a silence of anticipation. I had her right where I wanted her. The more she tried to fix things, the more she dug herself into a deeper hole. And soon, she would realize that the damage was already done. Chapter 5. The Turn of the Knife. I could feel the weight of the days pressing down on me as I watched Linda struggle to make sense of everything that had unfolded. She thought she could fix this. She thought she could smooth over the cracks, put a bandage on the wound she had created. But the thing about betrayal is that no matter how hard you try, it never really heals. It only festers, growing deeper, darker, until there's no turning back. One morning, Linda tried again. She sat me down in the kitchen, her eyes wide with a mixture of desperation and guilt. She had been quiet for the past few days, probably trying to figure out how to undo the damage she had done. But no matter how many tears she shed, how many apologies she offered, I was unmoved. "Jacob, I know I've hurt you, and I can't take back what I've done," she said, her voice shaking. "But I love you, I do. I've made a huge mistake, and I'm sorry." I looked at her, not speaking. I could see the rawness in her eyes, the way her hands fidgeted in her lap. But it didn't matter anymore. The love I had once felt for her had turned to ash. The woman sitting across from me wasn't the same person I had married. She was a strangier, a liar, a cheater, someone who had torn apart the very fabric of our life together. "You're right," I said coldly. "You've made a huge mistake, and there's no coming back from it." Her face fell, and she reached out, as if to grab my hand, but I pulled it away before she could touch me. It was too much. The betrayal, the lies, it was all too much for me to bear. I stood up, pushing the chair back with force. "I gave you everything, Linda. My trust, my love, my loyalty. And you threw it all away for a man who wasn't worth a damn. And now you want me to just forgive you? To forget everything?" I paced back and forth, my mind racing. I had to be strong. I couldn't let her see how much this was destroying me. I had to show her the consequences to make her feel the way I did. She needed to understand the depth of what she had done, and I wasn't going to let her off easy. "I've been living with this for days, Linda," I continued, my voice rising. "The doubt, the anger, the humiliation. You didn't just hurt me, you crushed everything I believed in. And now, you're sitting here asking for forgiveness. But you don't deserve it. Not now. Not ever." Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't flinch. I was done feeling sorry for her. Done feeling anything but a cold, bitter rage. I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't let her walk away unscathed. I had to make sure she understood the full extent of her actions. "I'm not the man you married anymore," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And I'm not the man who's going to forgive you and pretend like nothing happened. I've seen the truth. And now you're going to see what happens when you destroy someone like this." Linda tried to speak, but I cut her off, my words sharp and final. "You wanted to play a game, Linda. Now you're going to lose." I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her there trembling. I could hear her calling after me, but I didn't turn back. I didn't need to hear her excuses anymore. The stage was set, and now it was time to finish what I had started. Chapter 6. The Calm Before the Storm. After that day, the tension between Linda and me became almost unbearable. We existed in the same space, but were strangers to each other. The house felt colder, more distant, like a place where memories had been forgotten, where love had been replaced by something darker, more poisonous. She tried to make amends in the days that followed, her apologies coming in waves. She would cook dinner, bring me coffee, try to start conversations, but all I could do was watch her, dissect every action she took, every word she said. It was like looking at a person through a glass window, a figure trapped on the other side, unreachable. I wanted to feel the anger, to lash out, but there was something more dangerous within me, a cold, calculated resolve. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. No, I had learned that revenge wasn't about raw emotions. It was about control. It was about waiting for the right moment to strike. I spent my days with a mechanical precision, going about my routine, pretending to be the man she once knew. But inside, my mind was working overtime, planning the next steps. The idea of confronting Ewan, the man who had stolen her heart, had crossed my mind more than once, but I couldn't just rush into it. I needed to take my time, to gather the perfect evidence, the perfect moment, to make him feel the sting of my wrath. It wasn't until that Saturday night when Linda was out with her friends again that I knew the time had come. I had spent the past few days gathering information, analyzing every detail, every conversation. I knew where she was headed that night, and I knew that this time, Ewan wouldn't be just a distant figure on the periphery of my pain. This time, he would be the target of my revenge. I had already arranged things. The hotel room, the key, the photos. Everything was set in motion. I wanted to see them, to catch them in the act, to watch the moment when Linda would realize that she had crossed a line that couldn't be undone, that she had turned me into something unrecognizable, someone who would do anything to make her feel the weight of her decisions. That evening, I watched her leave, her usual smile plastered on her face, unaware of the trap I had laid for her. I followed her at a safe distance, careful not to draw attention to myself. I couldn't afford to make a mistake now, not after everything I had sacrificed, not after all the pain she had caused. As she drove off toward the familiar bar, my heart began to race. This wasn't just about catching her anymore. This was about showing her once and for all the consequences of her actions. This was about making her feel as small and insignificant as she had made me feel. I parked across the street from the bar and watched her walk in, her back straight, her head held high. The facade of confidence she put on was laughable. I knew what was really going on behind those walls, the guilt, the shame. She was no longer the woman I had loved. She was a stranger, an imposter. But tonight, she was going to face the reality of her choices. She was going to face me, and I wasn't going to let her escape. Chapter 7. The Moment of Truth. I sat in my car, parked across the street from the bar, watching the door. The rain had started to fall, heavy droplets pattering against the windshield, but I barely noticed. My focus was entirely on Linda. She had walked in with such confidence, her head held high, but I knew the truth behind that false composure. She was hiding something, and tonight I was going to expose it. Minutes passed, then an hour. The world outside seemed to slow down as the weight of the moment pressed down on me. My fingers gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. I wasn't nervous. I was ready. Everything had led to this moment. I had made my choice, and there was no turning back now. My mind replayed the past few months, the lies, the deceit, the cold betrayal, and each image only fueled my resolve. Then I saw him, Ewan. He appeared in the doorway of the bar, laughing, looking carefree as he checked his phone, unaware of the watchful eyes on him. He looked every bit the arrogant fool I had imagined. His self-assuredness made my blood boil, but it also made me realize just how far Linda had fallen. She had chosen him, and now I was going to make her feel the full weight of that choice. I had waited long enough. I stepped out of the car, pulling the collar of my jacket up against the rain, and walked toward the bar. I was calm, almost eerily so, as if everything had already been decided long before tonight. My steps echoed in the empty street, and with every stride, the tension in my chest grew tighter. This was it. I was about to confront them both, and nothing was going to stop me. I pushed the door open and entered, the sound of the rain muffled by the low hum of conversation inside. The bar was dimly lit, the air thick with the smell of alcohol and the murmur of people enjoying their Saturday night. But none of that mattered to me. All I could see was Linda and Ewan sitting at a corner booth, their heads close together, laughing at something only they knew. I felt my heart rate pick up, but I didn't let it show. I was in control. I was always in control. I walked toward them, each step a calculated movement. As I approached, I noticed Linda freeze, her eyes widening when she saw me. Her face went pale, and for the first time in a long while, I saw fear in her eyes. Ewan, on the other hand, seemed oblivious to the shift in the atmosphere. He turned toward me, raising an eyebrow in casual curiosity. But when he saw the look on my face, his expression faltered. "Jacob?" Linda's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of her guilt. "What are you doing here?" I stopped in front of them, looking down at Linda first, then turning my gaze to Ewan, who was still trying to make sense of the situation. I couldn't help but notice the smugness in his posture, the way he sat there like he was the one in control. But I wasn't interested in him. Not yet. My focus remained on Linda. "You've really gone this far, haven't you?" I said, my voice low, cutting through the tension in the room. Linda's eyes flickered to the ground, unable to meet my gaze. "You thought I wouldn't find out? You thought you could keep living this lie without facing the consequences?" She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up my hand, silencing her. "You've done enough talking, Linda. Now it's my turn." I turned back to Ewan, my eyes narrowing. "You," I said, my voice dripping with contempt. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just walk in and take whatever you want. But this isn't just about you. This is about what she's done to me, and you're going to feel it too." Ewan opened his mouth to respond, but I wasn't interested in his excuses. I had no intention of letting him off the hook. My eyes flicked back to Linda, who was now visibly shaking, her hands clenched in her lap. "I gave you everything," I said to her, my voice steady but full of venom. "And this is what you do with it? This is how you repay me?" The room had grown quiet, the air thick with the tension between us. People were starting to notice the scene unfolding, but I didn't care. This was between me and Linda, and Ewan for that matter. I wasn't going to let them walk away from this unscathed. Linda stood up, her face pale, her hands trembling. "Jacob, please don't do this. I'm sorry. I never wanted it to be like this." But I wasn't interested in her apologies anymore. I wasn't interested in anything she had to say. She had made her choice, and now she would face the consequences of it. "I don't care about your apologies, Linda. I don't care about your regrets. What I care about is the damage you've done. And now, you're going to see what happens when you betray me." I turned and walked away, leaving them both behind, their voices faint in my ears as I exited the bar. The rain had stopped, but the storm inside me still raged. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Chapter 8. The Fallout. The following days were like a nightmare I couldn't escape. Linda and I didn't speak much after that night at the bar, but there was no need for words. The damage had been done. I could feel her watching me from the other room, her presence like an unwelcome shadow, but I refused to acknowledge it. My mind was consumed with what I had seen, with the look in her eyes when I confronted her. The fear, the guilt. I had never thought I'd see that expression on her face, but now that I had, I didn't know what to do with it. I had no sympathy left for her. There was nothing left of the woman I once loved, only the hollow shell of someone who had shattered everything we had built together. And as much as I wanted to be angry, as much as I wanted to make her feel the way I did, I knew deep down that it wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was something darker, something colder, a deep, unrelenting sense of justice. She had to pay for this. But it wasn't just her. Ewan had been too smug, too cocky in his little world of lies. I knew that if I was going to make Linda truly understand the weight of her actions, I had to make him feel the same sting. He couldn't just walk away from this unscathed. He had to learn that betraying me came with consequences. I spent the next few days gathering everything I needed. Evidence, information. It was all there, waiting to be uncovered, and I wasn't going to waste any time. My plan was set in motion, and I could feel the excitement building inside me. This wasn't just about making Linda regret her choices, it was about making them both regret ever crossing me. It was late one evening when I decided to finally confront Ewan. Linda was out, probably at the office or out with her friends, pretending that everything was fine. I didn't care where she was. I had more important things to deal with. I went to his apartment, the same place I had seen Linda slip into so many times. I stood outside, watching his figure through the window, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. The anger inside me simmered, but I controlled it. I didn't need to be reckless. I needed to be precise. I rang the bell. The door opened, and there he stood, looking as smug as ever. The look on his face faded when he saw who it was. "Jacob?" He barely hid his surprise. "What the hell are you doing here?" I pushed past him, entering his apartment without waiting for an invitation. His confusion only fueled my resolve. I wasn't here for small talk. I was here to make him understand. "Where's Linda?" I asked coldly, looking around the apartment, though I already knew she wasn't here. It didn't matter. I wasn't here for her anymore. I was here for him. She's not here," Ewan stammered, clearly on edge. "What the hell is going on? You've been acting crazy lately." I turned to face him, my eyes narrowing. Crazy? Number, I've been patient. But now I'm done being patient. Ewan took a step back, his bravado cracking as he realized that I wasn't the same man he had once known. The man who had been weak, who had let Linda walk all over him. I had changed. And now it was his turn to feel the consequences. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice shaking now. But I could see the panic in his eyes. He knew. Deep down, he knew that I had everything I needed to destroy him. "I'm not here to argue, Ewan. I'm here to make you understand something," I said, my voice low, almost a whisper. "You've been playing a dangerous game, and now you're going to lose." He took another step back, eyes darting to the door, but I moved closer. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rising in panic. "I want you to understand that you're not untouchable," I said as I pulled the envelope from my jacket pocket. I tossed it onto the coffee table in front of him. "This is for you, Ewan. Take a look." His eyes flickered to the envelope, and for a moment, he hesitated. But then he reached for it, tearing it open with trembling hands. Inside, there were photos of him and Linda caught in compromising situations. Photos I had taken over the last few weeks. The guilt on his face was evident as he flipped through them, his confidence crumbling in front of me. "Where did you get these?" he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. His fear was palpable, and it felt like a sweet, satisfying victory to see him reduced to this state. "It doesn't matter where I got them," I replied, my tone cold. "What matters is that you're going to regret everything you've done, both of you." He swallowed hard, but he didn't dare say a word. He knew that he had no way out. This wasn't just about Linda anymore. This was about making both of them feel the consequences of their betrayal. I turned to leave, knowing that I had made my point. The fallout from this was just beginning, and I would enjoy every minute of it. Chapter 9. The Breaking Point. The next few days were a blur, but the storm inside me was growing stronger. I had seen the cracks begin to form in Ewan's facade, but that wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed him to feel the weight of his choices, to understand the depth of the mess he had made. But even that wasn't enough to satisfy the thirst for retribution that had taken root in me. It wasn't about justice anymore. It was about something deeper, something almost animalistic. I wanted to break them. I wanted to destroy what they had. Linda still hadn't reached out to me. She couldn't. She knew that the moment she did, there was no going back. Every time I looked at her, I saw the woman who had betrayed me, the woman who had given everything away for a fleeting moment of lust, leaving me behind like I didn't matter. She had made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. But I wasn't going to make it easy for her. She wanted to fix this. She thought she could undo the damage, but there was no fixing this. There was no going back. I had moved past anger. Now, all I felt was cold, clinical precision. I had spent days tracking their movements, piecing together the puzzle of their lives, the small lies, the hidden texts, the secret meetings, everything. And now, I had it all. All the proof I needed to bring their world crashing down. But it wasn't just about exposing them. No, I wanted to shatter them. I wanted to make sure that Linda never forgot the consequences of her actions. It was that night when I finally decided to take the final step. I knew she would be home late, and Ewan would be nowhere near. It was the perfect time. The perfect time to make sure she knew who was in control now. I waited in the living room, the only sound in the house being the soft ticking of the clock on the wall. The house felt colder, emptier than it ever had before. I was no longer the man she knew. I was something else. And I could see the fear in her eyes whenever she looked at me. She couldn't deny it. She knew what I was capable of now. When she finally walked in, her expression faltered the moment she saw me sitting in the darkness, my eyes fixed on her. She didn't say anything at first. She didn't need to. We both knew why I was here. "I'm sorry, Jacob," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I made a mistake. I know I hurt you. Please, just tell me what I can do to fix this." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat there, watching her. The woman who had once been my everything. The woman who had now become a stranger in my eyes. "Fix it?" I said quietly, my voice laced with disdain. "There's no fixing this, Linda. You can't just undo what you've done. You can't take back the betrayal, the lies. You can't take back the fact that you slept with him, that you chose him over me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't dare speak. She knew. She knew that no matter how many apologies she gave, no matter how much regret she showed, it wouldn't matter. The damage was done. "You think you can come in here and apologize and everything will be fine?" I asked, my voice cold. "You think I'll just forgive you because you say you're sorry? Number, you wanted to test me, Linda. You wanted to see how far you could push me before I cracked. Well, guess what? You've pushed me too far." She took a step forward, her hands trembling as she reached out to me. "Jacob, please, I'm begging you. Please don't do this." I stood up, my eyes never leaving hers. "You've already done it, Linda. You've already ruined everything, and now you're going to pay for it." Her face went pale as I pulled out the envelope, the same one I had shown Ewan days ago. I tossed it onto the table in front of her. She looked at the photos, her hand shaking as she picked them up. Her face contorted with shame and guilt, but I wasn't moved. I wasn't the same man anymore. "You think I didn't know?" I said, my voice rising now. "You think I didn't see it all? I knew about every late night, every lie you told, and I let you do it. I let you break me, but not anymore. Now it's my turn." Linda dropped the photos, her face pale, her breath coming in short gasps. "Jacob, please, I love you. I never wanted this to happen. I made a mistake, I swear to God." I stepped closer, towering over her. "You don't get to say that. You don't get to apologize and expect me to forgive you. I'm done with your lies. I'm done with you." I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. But there was no satisfaction in it, no victory. There was only emptiness. I knew I had broken her, but the truth was I didn't feel better. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel anything at all. I turned and walked toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no satisfaction in it, no victory. There was only emptiness. I knew I had broken her, but the truth was I didn't feel better. I didn't feel healed. I didn't feel anything at all. As I stepped out of the door and into the night, I realized something. There was no satisfaction in revenge. There was no relief in making them feel the pain I had felt. All I had done was add another layer to the darkness inside me, and now I wasn't sure if I could ever get out. Chapter 10. The Reckoning. Days passed in a blur, the silence between Linda and me growing thicker with each passing hour. She had tried to talk to me. She had tried to apologize, to beg me to understand, but I was past caring. Nothing she could say would fix the damage she had done. Nothing could repair the trust that had been shattered, the years of love that had been thrown away for a few moments of reckless lust. I had thought that after everything, after exposing Ewan, after seeing Linda's face, when she realized I knew the truth, I would feel better. But I didn't. Instead, I felt empty, hollow. The satisfaction I had hoped to feel from taking back control, from making them both pay for their betrayal, was nowhere to be found. All I could see was the woman who had once been my everything, now reduced to a shadow of who she had been. Linda had stopped trying to talk to me. It was like she had accepted that I was beyond reach. She had made her choice, and now I was making mine. I was done. Done with the lies, done with the betrayal, done with the life we had built together. I was no longer the man she had known, the man who would forgive her for anything. I was someone else now, someone darker. But as much as I had shut her out, I couldn't stop the thoughts that kept circling in my mind. I had ruined her, yes. I had broken her, yes. But in doing so, I had also broken something inside myself. A part of me that had been left behind in the ashes of everything I once loved. And now, all I could do was wait for the inevitable reckoning that was coming. It came on a Tuesday, just as I had expected. Linda had been quiet for the past few days, retreating into herself, avoiding me when she could. I had stopped caring. But that morning, something changed. She looked different. There was a strange calmness to her, an air of finality that hung around her like a shroud. She came into the living room where I was sitting and stood in front of me. There were no tears in her eyes, no pleading words, just a quiet resignation that chilled me to the bone. "I can't do this anymore, Jacob," she said, her voice steady but full of regret. "I can't live in this house, in this relationship, with all this anger. I've ruined everything, I know. But I can't fix it. Not like this, not anymore." I didn't respond. I just watched her, my gaze cold and distant. She was right after all. There was no fixing this. Nothing could erase the damage. And yet, hearing her say, those words still hit me harder than I expected. "I've made my bed," she continued, her voice breaking just slightly. "And now I have to lie in it. I'm leaving. I'm moving out. You don't have to do anything. I'll take care of it. I'll be gone by tonight." I looked at her, trying to find the words, but nothing came. The anger I had felt all this time, the need for revenge, had faded. All that was left was a bitter emptiness. She turned to leave, but then stopped, her back still facing me. "I'll always love you, Jub," she said, the words so quiet I almost didn't hear them. "But I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. Not anymore." And with that, she was gone. Just like that. No grand gestures, no tearful goodbyes. She simply walked out, leaving me alone in a house that felt colder than it ever had before. The silence that followed was deafening. I sat there for what felt like hours, the weight of her departure settling into my chest. I had gotten what I wanted, hadn't I? I had broken her. I had made her leave. But now that she was gone, I wasn't sure I felt any better. I wasn't sure I felt anything at all. For the first time in a long time, I realized something. Revenge hadn't healed me. It hadn't fixed the hole inside me. It hadn't brought me peace. All it had done was leave me emptier than before. I stood up, walking through the empty house, the rooms now echoing with the absence of her presence. The place felt hollow. The life we had built together felt like a distant memory, a dream that I could never wake up from. But then, as I stood in the living room, looking out the window at the empty street, I realized something else. I wasn't done. Not yet. The reckoning wasn't over, it was just beginning. Chapter 11. The final act. The days after Linda left felt like a fog. The house was empty, and so was I. She was gone. And in her absence, the weight of my actions hung heavier than I ever anticipated. The emptiness I had been chasing with every move, every cold gesture, every step toward revenge, was now a constant companion. I thought I'd feel relief when she left, when everything she had stolen from me, every bit of trust, every shred of love was gone. But I didn't. Instead, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into the abyss, and yet unable to move forward or backward. I had won. I had broken her. But at what cost? It wasn't until the next week that I saw Ewan again. I had avoided him since that day at his apartment, but I knew this final act couldn't be complete until I faced him. He had been living in the same delusional bubble, thinking that he had gotten away with everything, that he had gotten what he wanted, Linda, a piece of my life, without consequence. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not after everything he had done. I showed up at his apartment unannounced. It was early in the evening, and the light in his windows was dim, casting long shadows across the walls. When he saw me standing there at his door, his expression shifted from surprise to something darker. He knew, in that moment, that this wasn't going to end well for him. "What the hell are you doing here?" he asked, his voice low, trying to hold on to whatever facade he had left. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I walked past him and into his apartment, my presence a reminder of everything he had lost, everything he had betrayed. He followed me inside, his steps hesitant now. "This isn't over, Jacob. You can't keep coming after me forever." I turned to face him, my eyes cold and unfeeling. "You think I'm done? You think I'm finished? I've only just begun." His face faltered, his bravado slipping away. "What do you want from me?" I took a slow breath. "I want you to know what it feels like to lose everything, Ewan. To feel like you've lost something that you can't get back. You took her from me. Now, I'm taking you from her." He tried to step forward, as if to challenge me, but I held up my hand, stopping him in his tracks. I had everything I needed, the proof, the photos, the information, and this time I wasn't going to leave him with any room for escape. "You thought you could walk away from this without consequences," I said. "But there are always consequences, Ewan. There's always a price to pay for betrayal." His expression twisted, and for the first time I saw a glimpse of true fear in his eyes. He was terrified. He realized that I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous. I moved to the table where I had placed the envelope just like I had done with Linda. But this time, the envelope wasn't filled with just photos. It was filled with everything I had uncovered about him. The lies, the deals, the things he thought no one knew. Everything. I opened it slowly, watching as his eyes widened with dread. "You think you're the good guy in all of this?" I continued. "You think you've won? Number, you've lost. And now I'm going to make sure the world knows what kind of man you are. No one will ever trust you again. No one will ever look at you the same way." His face went pale as he scrambled to look at the documents, his hands trembling. "You can't do this," he said, his voice shaking. "You can't ruin me like this." I stepped closer, my voice low and cutting. "You think you have the right to ask for mercy? After what you did to me? After what you did to Linda?" He looked at me, pleading now, the cocky, arrogant man who had once looked down on me, reduced to a pathetic shell. "Please, Jacob, don't do this. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. I'll tell her everything. I cut him off with a sharp gesture. "It's too late for that. You can't fix what's already broken. And now, you're going to pay for it." The silence in the room was suffocating. I watched as he crumbled before me, the man who had once been my enemy, now a shadow of the person he had been. But I didn't feel any satisfaction. I didn't feel any relief. I just felt numb. As I turned to leave, I looked back one last time at Ewan, his broken face forever burned into my memory. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "You can't fix this. You've already lost." Don't forget to like the video if you felt the intensity of this story, and if you want more stories like this, stories that make you question everything, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notifications so you never miss an update.